Going to the zoo is a unique experience in life. After all, seeing wild animals up close and safely is something no one could otherwise provide. However, sometimes the safety that should be maximum can fail, and these failures cause horrible tragedies. An 11-year-old boy gets close to a tiger's enclosure and pets it as if it were nothing. The animal strikes back. A 3-year-old boy is thrown into a crocodile enclosure and is attacked. Boys go to the zoo, and one of them jumps over the safety barrier and gets too close to a Siberian tiger. Cases where children were attacked at the zoo. This is what you are about to see now. In early July 2014, Marcos Rocha and his son, Vrajamani, were in Cascavel, Paraná, Brazil. Rocha and his son, who lived together in São Paulo, had gone to visit Marcos's other son, a 3-year-old who lived with his ex-wife. Vrajamani was 11 years old, the oldest, and was on his school vacation period. For him, this trip promised fun outings and relaxed moments, exactly what every child expects. Marcos also had other relatives whom he took the opportunity to visit. On July 30, the father took both of his sons and decided to take them to the municipal zoo of Cascavel, one of the most well-known public spaces in the city, which is part of the Danilo Galafasi Municipal Park, a preservation area created in 1976 that combines a natural park with a zoo and leisure area. It houses 350 animals from more than 79 species, with big cats being one of the most popular highlights. The safety areas, in 2014, coexisted with warning signs not to feed the animals, not to enter restricted areas, and not to get close to animals at the enclosures. No incident involving an attack had ever happened. People usually respected the rules. Vrajamani was curious and impulsive, insisting on doing things on his own. On that July 30, it was just the three of them on a normal outing, something they enjoyed doing. Vrajamani and his brother liked animals and nature. As soon as the family entered, they went straight to the most exciting part, the big cats. One tiger, however, caught attention. Who, as he was called, was a Bengal tiger and considered by the caretakers to be one of the calmest animals there. Vrajamani approached the safety barrier. Who was clearly visible. Excited by the tiger's proximity, the boy jumped over the low barrier. One of the people at the scene recorded the moment, which would later go viral. Marcos, the father, had stepped away at some point, leaving his older son alone. Marcos focused only on the younger child, moving away from Vrajamani. At that moment, the father simply became absent, giving the perfect opportunity for a curious boy to approach a deadly feline. Vrajamani jumped the barrier and got very close to the fence. He interacted with the animal, running his hand over its fur. The people who saw the scene did little beyond filming. The tragedy seemed inevitable, yet no one moved to pull the boy away or even alert a staff member or look for his father. Vrajamani quickly reached the peak of his boldness, placing his arm almost entirely through the bars inside the enclosure. Up until that moment, nothing had happened, which may have been related to Hu's behavior, calm for a tiger. But that patience ran out. As soon as Vrajamani put his arm in, Hu attacked. He bit down fully on the hand and grabbed the forearm, tearing through skin and flesh. Vrajamani screamed, and finally, visitors jumped the barrier to intervene. The tragedy, once preventable, had now happened. While men grabbed the boy and pulled him, trying to free him from Hu's grip, Marcos was alerted. The father ran to save Vrajamani. Upon seeing the scene, jumped the barrier and helped, punching and kicking the animal. Hu let go. The boy's hand was hanging and his arm was destroyed. Vrajamani was carried away from the area near the enclosure and then placed into an ambulance, which arrived just minutes later. He repeatedly said, "I'm going to die. I can't feel my arm." Paramedics treated him at the scene before taking him to the hospital. Doctors had to make the decision to amputate his arm at the shoulder. The police opened an investigation, and the father was charged with serious bodily injury and negligence. He was taken to the police station, but was not detained and was released after giving a statement. Years later, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for negligence, but as a first-time offender. The sentence was served under an open regime. The people who watched and filmed were criticized by authorities for not acting before the tragedy, but they were not criminally punished. The police also investigated employees and the zoo, but no one was considered more at fault than the father. During the investigation, witnesses stated that they had warned Marcos. Vrajamani, then 11 years old, became nationally known. He underwent surgeries and months of rehabilitation, trying to adapt to his new reality. In interviews, he said it was a tragedy, but not something to dwell on. In 2016, he began swimming, progressed quickly, and started training seriously, focusing on competitions. He won medals in championships. Currently, he is a para-swimmer and already has more than 40 medals. His main focus is the Paralympics and becoming a world champion. Although he experienced a traumatic incident with the tiger, he says that even though he remembers everything, it no longer bothers him. At the time, shortly after the attack, the zoo was questioned by the media about the possibility of Hu being euthanized, but veterinarians were firm in stating that there was never any such intention. He continued living normally in his habitat. In June 2026, in Cambridgeshire, England, a quiet family living in a simple home was planning a trip. Their 3-year-old son was the most excited. The destination? Johnson's of Old Hurst, a large zoo unlike the traditional ones. It was a rural, family-run complex that brought together many things in one place. Besides animals of all sizes, it was also a farm, with shops and cafes. Even though it could be expensive, the small middle-class family planned everything carefully. They had local jobs and lived a stable life. The idea of the outing sparked immense excitement in the curious and energetic boy. On June 18, they got into the car and set off. The journey would take about 45 minutes. Since they lived in another town within the county, they would travel around 30 to 60 kilometers, depending on traffic. Along the way, there was little traffic, allowing them to arrive quickly. It was still early, around 10 a.m. The boy was eager, wanting to get out of the car right away and start exploring. After parking, they finally stepped out for a trip that promised plenty of fun. Johnson's of Old Hurst, being a popular place, already had a good number of visitors even in the morning. They bought tickets, though the boy didn't need one due to his age. As soon as they entered, they saw goats, sheep, and rabbits, harmless farm animals. Following the path, they came across foxes, small monkeys, and raccoons, all in their proper enclosures. The boy smiled and spoke excitedly as he passed each animal. The classic section was the most popular: lions, tigers, and leopards, drawing visitors' attention as they took photos and recorded videos. However, it was in the crocodile area that something seemed to change in the boy. He became far more excited than he had been the entire time. The reptiles were in water-filled enclosures, motionless, appearing harmless in the eyes of a child. The barriers, although low, were enough to keep the animals contained. There were signs prohibiting any intrusion or feeding of the animals. Up until that moment, no one had broken the rules, and no incident had ever occurred. On that day, while the child stood pressed against the safety barrier, a common sight, and was excited by the animals, his parents became distracted and moved slightly away from him. They were not far. However, a man suddenly approached the boy, picked him up, and simply threw him into the enclosure. The boy fell near one of the animals and was attacked. He screamed and began to cry. People around were shocked and panicked. Everyone nearby, witnessing the scene, reacted quickly and with determination. They entered the enclosure and pulled him out. He was not inside for more than 2 minutes. Even so, it was enough for him to be seriously injured. A staff member alerted the zoo about what had happened, also reporting that the rescue had already been carried out. The parents eventually appeared after the commotion. Everything happened so quickly that they only realized their son had been injured when he was pulled out. While the boy was being cared for, an ambulance was already on its way, along with the police. The boy was taken to the hospital conscious, and the man who threw him was arrested. It is believed that he has learning disabilities and was at the zoo with caregivers. He did not know the child and was released on bail. Authorities stated that he was not fit to be interviewed. The boy underwent surgeries, and his parents effectively began living at the hospital. He survived. But although the extent of his injuries was not disclosed, they were considered severe. The family thanked everyone for their support, including those who rescued their son. They did not take any legal action against the man, and the crocodile that attacked was not euthanized. Donations were made, and the parents used them to cover hospital expenses. The outing that promised fun nearly turned into a fatal tragedy, and it only took a brief moment of parental distraction for the worst to happen. The Baghdad Zoo is located in the city of the same name, in Iraq. It is one of the largest and most comprehensive leisure spaces in Baghdad, functioning as a major recreational complex that combines nature, tourism, and entertainment. For many years, it remained a very popular destination for both children and adults. Both the animals and the attractions serve as a strong draw for visitors of all ages. On the 21st of March, 2026, it was Eid, an Islamic religious holiday celebrated by Muslims. During this period in particular, parks like the Baghdad Zoo are filled with families and young people. In this context, a 13-year-old boy and his friends, unaccompanied by adults, decided to go to the park to celebrate. They wanted to see the animals, take photos, record videos, and spend a few hours there enjoying the day outdoors. It was nothing out of the ordinary. Upon entering, they were met with a large crowd. As they walked, they tried to catch glimpses of the animals among the people. At first, they focused on the more harmless ones, small monkeys and various types of birds. Then they moved on to the larger animals, giraffes, elephants, and hippos. They were having fun, but it still didn't seem like enough. They wanted more. Shortly after noon, after stopping to eat something there, they continued walking around the park. This time, however, they decided not to spend time on calmer animals. Instead, they went straight to what they considered the most exciting ones, the big cats. In that area, the animals, clearly visible, seemed almost unreal. However, among all the predators, the one that drew the most attention was the tiger. This animal belonged to the Siberian subspecies, considered the largest feline in the world. It was enormous, and that was what set it apart from the others. The attention of the small group of 13 and 14-year-old boys was completely captured. They took photos and recorded videos, but it still didn't seem enough. One of them then had an idea: to get closer to the animal. There were signs prohibiting approaching, but they were completely ignored. They were in the safe area along with the other visitors. The boy didn't hesitate and jumped over the safety barrier, entering the restricted zone. He moved so quickly that the people around him couldn't intervene. But he didn't just want to get closer out of fascination. He also wanted to show his friends how brave he was. He got very close to the bars, close enough that if he stretched out his arm, he could touch the animal's fur. However, just as everything seemed fine, the worst happened. In an instant, with the boy pressed against the bars, the tiger lunged at him, biting his leg and violently pulling him toward itself. The attack triggered screams and panic among the witnesses. It was a horrifying scene. Guards and staff were alerted and rushed to the location as quickly as possible. They arrived in time to intervene and prevent an even greater tragedy. They managed to pull his leg away from the animal's mouth and free him from its grip. Severely injured, he was immediately taken by ambulance. Initially admitted to a local hospital, he had to be transferred due to the severity of his injuries. He was ultimately taken to Imam Ain al-Qadamain, one of the largest hospital complexes in the capital. Because of his injuries, doctors had to perform several complex surgeries to repair severe damage to blood vessels and multiple fractures in his leg. Despite the violence of the attack, health authorities stated that his condition was stable and that he was out of danger, also denying rumors that he had died. The zoo issued a statement claiming it was not at fault. In its own words, the incident was the result of a clear violation of safety rules. The park director also reinforced the warning that safety barriers and warning signs exist for a reason. He concluded with the statement, "On the other side, there is no spectacle." The boy, whose name was not disclosed, recovered in the hospital. However, his long-term condition remains unknown. His family was not mentioned in any reports. This was the first tiger attack at the Baghdad Zoo, the result of reckless and thoughtless actions that could have ended much worse, both for the boy and for the tiger. The Moscow Zoo is one of the largest and oldest in Europe, with scientific programs, top-tier veterinary care, and modern infrastructure. Like the city itself, it is a well-developed place. However, this is not the rule. When it comes to Russian zoos, it is not possible to generalize. In smaller cities, these leisure spaces remain stuck in time, with outdated equipment and little funding or even neglect. Tambov is a regional city with a modest economy, in no way comparable to Moscow. It represents the Russian interior well. There is located the Tambov State University, which in 2010 had a small zoo connected to the university, used for teaching biology and veterinary studies, as well as allowing simple public visits. It was something like a regional educational zoo. No type of incident involving animals had ever happened, and this led to the absence of safety measures beyond the most basic ones. Docile and non-aggressive animals were kept loose, while larger ones were held in precarious enclosures. The way the animals lived contrasted with the prestige of the university. On the 29th of May 2010, Anastasia Luyulina, 4 years old, her grandfather, and her grandmother went there. It was a family outing. It was very common for parents to take their children to see the animals. Every day, the place received several visitors, most of whom were local residents. For the three of them, there was no sense of risk. It was a safe zoo. The fact that nothing had ever happened gave the environment a false sense of security. It was just an ordinary day. While some children ran and played, Anastasia stayed calm, close to her grandparents. They then went to the big cat area, one of the main attractions. Like any family, they would occasionally stop to take photos. In the big cat enclosure, they came across a scene that was normal for any local resident, but strange to a foreigner. The cages had no external safety barriers, allowing anyone to approach the bars directly. There were also no warning signs. The metal bars were wide enough to allow dangerous contact. When Anastasia reached the area, she slowed her steps. It was in front of the lions that she stopped. The presence of those animals was striking. Her grandparents had the idea of taking a photo of the girl with the lions in the background, a male and a female. Anastasia approached the bars. She got very close. However, her proximity was not welcomed, and the lioness, seemingly calm, became agitated. As a predator, she reacted quickly to nearby stimuli. The moment the child got too close, almost pressed against the bars, the animal lunged suddenly. In a swift movement, it extended its paw with claws, exposed and grabbed Anastasia. Everything happened in seconds. She screamed desperately, and her grandparents ran to pull her away. They held her from one side while the lioness pulled from the other. Other visitors who arrived reacted, joining the grandparents to pull the child away and stop the attack. The screams grew louder, and more people gathered. Men struck the animal until it finally released her. Anastasia was severely injured. She was rushed to the hospital. Her grandparents did not wait for an ambulance. They simply put her in the car and drove as fast as they could. She had deep cuts on her arm and neck, as well as lacerations. Fortunately, none of her limbs were damaged enough to require amputation. She was admitted in critical condition and underwent emergency surgeries. Her condition was stabilized. She survived due to the speed of the rescue. The Oktyabrski Court of Tambov issued a verdict in a criminal case regarding the attack. It was determined that the director of the Zoo Botanical Garden, Evgeny Cherbayev, failed to take proper measures for the maintenance of the animals and the safety of visitors. Cherbaev was found guilty of negligence, resulting in serious bodily injury. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, along with a ban on holding leadership positions in state bodies and institutions for 3 years. Anastasia and her family received about 400,000 rubles, a little over $5,000, an amount that in Russia corresponds to about 4 to 6 months of an average salary. A significant amount, but not very high. Anastasia recovered, but it is not known whether she had any lasting consequences. The local family outing turned into a disaster, exposing a place that was known and respected. All the prestige that Tambov State University presented strongly contrasted with its care, both for the animals and for people's safety. Over the years, the zoo section was eventually closed due to lack of structure, maintenance, and pressure. Blagoveshchensk is a city in the far east of Russia, in the Amur region, located on the border with China, one of the few places in the world where it is possible to clearly see the other country. It is small by Russian standards, more of a regional city. The city does not have permanent zoos. All of them are traveling, housing their animals in small cages with simple structures. The isolation, the size of the city, and the low demand from residents result in little concern and minimal investment. These temporary zoos operate in parks, fairs, and open areas where they can attract more attention. In January 2012, originally from Pyatigorsk, a traveling zoo called Liger was touring across the far east of Russia. They stopped in Blagoveshchensk. Their animals included tigers, lions, lynxes, and leopards, as well as their main attraction, the one that gave them their name, the Ligers, hybrids of lions and tigers. It was the afternoon of the 4th. It was cold, but even with the harsh winter of the Far East, the city park was busy. Liger had set up there with colorful banners and drawings of big cats that sparked curiosity. Among the visitors was Ivan Petrov, 3 years old. He arrived with his parents. Holding his mother's hand, he looked around curiously at the movement. Everything was new. Lively voices filled the air. For a small city, Liger provided an unusual opportunity for entertainment. Ivan soon passed the ticket booth and followed a narrow corridor. The smell of the animals was noticeable. When the first cages appeared, he was fascinated. Exotic birds and different kinds of monkeys. He pointed curiously while his parents interacted with him. They moved from cage to cage, getting as close as they wanted. There were no additional safety barriers, only a "do not feed the animals" sign. His parents took photos. Everything seemed normal. They continued at a relaxed pace. As they moved forward, the animals became larger, but the size of the cages did not change much. The bars were also simple. There was essentially no distance between the public and the animals. Everything was too accessible. Ivan reached the big cats. The space was more open, but still improvised. There were the animals that attracted the most attention: lions and tigers. One of them, a Siberian tiger, stood near the bars, visible and imposing. Its presence drew visitors, who approached to observe and take photos. Like others around them, the parents decided to stop. The idea came naturally, to take a photo of the boy with the animal in the background. It was something others were doing. Ivan was placed slightly ahead, close to the bars. Too young to understand the risk, he simply watched. The tiger, in turn, remained alert. For a few seconds, everything seemed normal, but the distance between the animal and the child was far too small. The moment Ivan came within reach, the tiger reacted. The movement was fast, almost impossible for those present to anticipate. In a natural predator instinct, it lunged with its paw through the available opening, striking the child. What had been a normal outing turned into chaos in a matter of seconds. Screams filled the area. The parents reacted immediately, pulling the boy away while others nearby were startled and tried to help. When they managed to free him, he was already unconscious and bleeding heavily. He was quickly taken to the nearest hospital. His injuries were extremely severe, including head trauma and deep cuts to the head. He was urgently transferred to a larger hospital, where he underwent surgery. He was stabilized, but remained hospitalized. Ivan survived due to the rapid response. Liger had its activities immediately suspended in the city. The Blagoveshchensk city administration terminated its contract and prohibited it from continuing operations there. The criminal case opened after the attack accused those responsible for Liger of providing an unsafe service to the public. However, although they were charged, no one was arrested and the animals were not seized. Liger simply moved on to another city. Petrov's case is very similar to Anastasia's, but the consequences for Liger were much smaller. The constant transportation, small cages, and limited budget, potentially leading to reduced veterinary care, increased the risk of mistreatment and stress, making the animals more prone to attack.